he's got a lot of white powder around him as well that seems to be sort of giving off gas of some description. He smells a bit bleachy.
This was a proper whodunit from the start, where I had a victim that we knew nothing about, no witnesses, no suspect, no weapon, no motive, and very little evidence to go on.
Kilburn Drive in Wigan was quiet. A cold Thursday night that felt ordinary. Minutes later, that quiet shattered. A knock, a single gunshot, a man collapsed on his driveway. What began years earlier with one swipe on a dating app spiraled into a precise, planned attack. Weapons prepared, plates cloned, corrosive chemicals ready. Detectives called it chilling. This is the Tinder date that ended a life, and the plot that nearly got away. On Kilburn Drive in Shevington, Wigan, the night was calm, the kind of winter evening where the streets are empty and windows glow with the soft light of families settling in. But then something broke that quiet. A neighbour spotted something at the bottom of a driveway, a shape lying still on the ground. At first, they weren't sure what they were looking at. Within minutes, emergency services swarmed the scene. Police sealed off the road as fire crews and paramedics tried to assess what they were dealing with. They feared there was a chemical hazard. Officers in hazmat suits moved in, working under floodlights. It was only when the scene was examined up close that the reality became clear. The man lying there was 38-year-old Liam Smith. He had been shot in the face. After that, chemicals in an attempt to destroy evidence. Detectives later described the scene as unlike anything they had seen before. The combination of gunshot wounds, corrosive substances, and the deliberate effort to degrade the body told them this was no random attack. This was something planned, cold, and calculated. But the question in those first hours was simple. Who would want to kill Liam Smith? He wasn't known to police. He had no enemies. By midnight, Greater Manchester Police's major incident team had launched a murder inquiry. But they were starting with almost nothing. No witnesses, no clear motive, only a brutal crime scene and the haunting smell of chemicals in the air. Liam Smith's name quickly spread across headlines, but behind the crime scene was a man whose life looked nothing like the violent end he met. At 38, Liam was a father of 2 young boys, a devoted dad who, according to his family, would do anything for those he loved. Friends described him as generous, the kind of man who would give the shirt off his back without a second thought. He lived in Shevington, Wigan, where he ran his own business, LPS Electrical and Build Limited, a small company that kept him busy but allowed him to provide for his family. His past included service as a soldier, a chapter that those close to him said had shaped his strong but quiet character. In the days after his death, tributes poured in. Flowers and cards appeared along Kilburn Drive. Neighbours leaving messages about a man they called kind-hearted and dependable. His sister Gemma spoke of him as her rock, someone who had always been there no matter what. There was no hint of the kind of life that attracts violence. Liam had no criminal connections or enemies. He was simply a father, a brother, and a friend who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or so it seemed at first. But as detectives began to dig into his past, a single name emerged. Rachel Fulstow, a woman Liam had met briefly in 2019 through a dating app. A single encounter long forgotten by Liam, but one that would become the root of a deadly chain of events. For investigators, it raised the first question that mattered. Could something that happened years ago have come back to destroy his life? In 2019, Liam Smith and Rachel Fulstow crossed paths in what seemed like a chance connection. They matched on Tinder and agreed to meet in York. The date appeared unremarkable. Dinner, drinks, and later a hotel room. For Liam, it was just another night. He moved on with his life, never knowing that this brief encounter would resurface years later in the worst possible way. Rachel, however, would later claim that what happened that night wasn't consensual. She didn't describe it as rape, and she never reported it to the police. In fact, the following day, she had lunch with Liam before heading home. Nothing in that moment suggested that their meeting would one day be twisted into the motive for a killing. 2 years later, Rachel Fulstow's life was entangled with Michael Hillier, a man with a dangerous reputation. Hillier from Sheffield was a drug dealer who prided himself on staying under the radar. He knew about burner phones, clone number plates, and how to make evidence vanish. To the outside world, he played the part of a flashy but successful man. Expensive cars, a confident presence, and a tough exterior. But behind closed doors, he was volatile and controlling. Rachel, who had previously worked for luxury hotel chains, found herself drawn into his world. What began as a relationship quickly became a toxic mix of jealousy and manipulation. Hillier's obsession deepened when Rachel told him about her one light encounter with Liam Smith. Whether it was guilt, fear of losing Hillier, or something else entirely, Rachel's account fed his anger. He convinced himself that Liam needed to be punished. But this wasn't just about revenge for a past encounter. Hillier's ego, his need to dominate, began to twist the narrative. He saw himself as someone who could take matters into his own hands. A dangerous belief that Rachel neither stopped nor openly encouraged. What detectives would later piece together is that their relationship laid the groundwork for something unthinkable. Hillier's influence was growing. Rachel's silence, whether out of fear, loyalty, or manipulation, allowed that influence to take hold. This was the turning point. What started as a troubled relationship was about to evolve into something far worse. A partnership that would soon be tied to one of the most shocking crimes Britain had seen in years. The decision to kill Liam Smith was not made overnight. The plot against Liam Smith began quietly months before the night of the murder. Detectives later uncovered that the preparation started as early as May 2022. From that point on, Michael Hillier and Rachel Fulstow's actions revealed a disturbing level of detail and patience. Rachel's involvement was subtle but essential. She began by researching Liam online, not just his business, LPS Electrical and Build Limited, but also his personal life and home address. She combed through search results, and her digital footprint revealed chilling queries like, what is premeditated, and how long does it take for a car to burn completely? She also scouted Mitsubishi Shogun models, the same vehicle Hillier would later use, and checked the weather forecast for Wigan on the day of the planned attack. Hillier, meanwhile, prepared with a precision that alarmed detectives once they pieced it together. He sourced blank firing guns and modified them to fire live ammunition. He trained in his Sheffield cellar, firing at makeshift targets to improve his accuracy. He also purchased corrosive chemicals, sulphuric acid, and soda crystals with the intention of destroying evidence and making the crime scene unrecognizable. By early November, their plan had shifted into action. On the 2nd of November 2022, Hillier made his first trip from Sheffield to Wigan. This wasn't to strike, but to carry out hostile reconnaissance. He sat in his Mitsubishi Shogun, a vehicle already fitted with clone plates, and watched Liam's home for hours. CCTV later showed Hillier's vehicle parked nearby, almost blending into the quiet neighbourhood. In the weeks that followed, the couple fine-tuned their plan. He secured the weapons, the chemicals, and the false plates, one of which read as R22, a plate that would later become a critical clue in the investigation. This was no random act of violence. Every move was calculated. Hillier and Fulstow were waiting for the perfect moment, a night when Liam would be home alone and vulnerable. By the 24th of November, everything was ready. The plan was set in motion. Michael Hillier left Sheffield early. His Mitsubishi Shogun fitted with the same cloned R22 plates. By mid-morning, he was parked on Kilburn Drive in Shvington, positioned so he could see Liam Smith's house, but remain unnoticed. He brought with him everything needed for the attack: a modified blank firing gun, sulphuric acid, soda crystals, and high-vis clothing to make him look like a workman. For 10 hours, Hillier waited. Neighbours later recalled seeing the vehicle, but thought nothing of it. CCTV from a nearby property would later capture glimpses of Hillier stepping out of the car, adjusting his high-vis jacket and pacing as he rehearsed what was about to happen. As evening fell, Hillier prepared to strike. Just after 6:30 p.m, he walked up to Liam's house wearing a head torch, a detail meant to draw Liam outside under the guise of a work-related issue. Moments later, Liam stepped out of his home. What happened next was captured only by sound. A single gunshot heard on nearby CCTV audio, which would prove fatal. Hillier fired at close range, hitting him in the face. Liam collapsed just outside his driveway, but Hillier wasn't finished. He drove around the block before returning to the scene. From the back of his Shogun, he retrieved bottles of corrosive chemicals. He poured sulphuric acid and soda crystals over Liam's body. A brutal act designed to destroy forensic evidence and leave a scene so disturbing it would confuse investigators. Within minutes, Hillier was gone. He abandoned the Shogun later that night, burning it to destroy any trace of his involvement. For the community of Kilburn Drive, the events of that evening were shocking. The quiet street suddenly became a crime scene, with emergency services arriving to find Liam's body surrounded by white residue and chemical fumes. Detectives quickly realized this was no random killing. It was premeditated, precise, and unlike anything they had encountered in years. In the hours after Liam Smith's murder, Michael Hillier drove back to Yorkshire, leaving behind a scene of chaos on Kilburn Drive. His Mitsubishi Shogun, now a key piece of evidence, was later burned out. The cloned R22 or plates destroyed along with it too. He wanted every trace of his presence wiped clean. Rachel Fulstow played her part, carefully crafting alibis. While Hillier carried out the attack, she kept her digital activity quiet, knowing police would look at phone data. But her earlier searches, weather forecasts in Wigan, information on burning vehicles, and details about Liam's business were already saved. Days after the murder, instead of lying low, the couple acted as if nothing had happened. They boarded a flight to Jamaica, beginning a 2-week holiday in the Caribbean. Photos later recovered by detectives showed them riding horses in the sea, smiling as if the events of Kilburn Drive had never taken place. For investigators, this was a crucial detail. While Greater Manchester Police were piecing together the puzzle of Liam's death, Hillier and F-Tow were thousands of miles away, enjoying cocktails and sunsets. Their lack of remorse, and the arrogance of believing they could escape justice, would later become a central theme in court. Back in the UK, officers combed through hundreds of hours of CCTV, looking for anything unusual around Kilburn Drive on the 24th of November, 2022. That's when they spotted the Mitsubishi Shogun. It had been parked in the area for nearly 10 hours, barely moving, and then leaving the scene soon after the attack. Detectives issued an appeal for information about the vehicle, and every detail about it became critical, including its false registration R22A. The breakthrough came when South Yorkshire Police reported that they had stopped this exact vehicle weeks earlier, and Michael Hillier was behind the wheel. This discovery immediately put Hillier on the radar. From that moment, the case began to fall into place. Further checks on Hillier's background revealed his involvement in large-scale cannabis production and a history of staying off the grid using burner phones and other tactics to avoid police attention. But even he had left a digital trail. Phone records placed him in Wigan on the day of the murder. When the couple returned from Jamaica, the walls were closing in. Hillier was arrested in January 2023. Fulstow, initially treated as a witness, lied repeatedly during interviews. More damning evidence emerged when detectives examined Rachel Fulstow's online activity, her searches for Liam's business, and for all of the activity we already discussed. This made it clear she wasn't just an innocent bystander. Police pieced together that she had helped Hillier plan the murder, feeding him the information needed to find Liam. By February, she too was under arrest. The cover-up had failed. The meticulous planning that Hillier and Fulstow believed would protect them had instead left behind a trail of evidence that detectives would use to bring them both down. For Liam Smith's family, the night of the 24th of November, 2022, shattered everything. In the days that followed, their quiet street became a crime scene filled with flashing lights, forensic tents, and news crews. But behind the headlines was a family struggling to comprehend how their son, brother, and father could have been taken from them in such a brutal way. Liam's parents, Julia and Phil Smith, made public appeals for information as the investigation unfolded. At a press conference, Julia broke down while pleading for anyone with knowledge of her son's murder to come forward. Phil, his voice shaking, described the killing as savage and senseless, saying the family was haunted by the manner of his death. 2 young boys were left without their father, a man who had been at the center of their world. Friends and neighbors spoke of how devoted Liam was to his children, always working to provide for them, always present in their lives. 2 young boys will now have to spend the rest of their lives without their adoring father. His words echoing the raw pain of a family torn apart. As the weeks turned into months, the family's grief deepened, compounded by the horrific details that emerged about how Liam had been killed. The calculated cruelty of it all was impossible to reconcile with the man they knew. A father, a son, a brother who simply lived a quiet life and worked hard for his family. For Liam's family, justice would never bring him back. But as they sat through the trial months later, they clung to the hope that the truth, however painful, would at least ensure that those responsible for his death would never harm anyone else. On the 20th of July, 2023, the trial of Michael Hillier and Rachel Fulstow began at Mishaw Street Crown Court in Manchester. The courtroom was packed with journalists, family members, and officers who had spent months piecing together the brutal events of the 24th of November, 2022. The prosecution, led by Jason Pitter Casey, laid out a case of premeditated murder driven by what he described as vigilante justice. He told jurors how Michael Hillier and Rachel Fulstow had carefully plotted Liam Smith's killing for months. The defense attempted to challenge the narrative. Hillier admitted manslaughter, but denied murder, claiming he acted out of a misguided sense of justice after Fulstow told him Liam had non-consensual sex with her during their Tinder date in 2019. He insisted it was a crime of passion, not a calculated plan. Fulstow, on the other hand, denied all involvement, insisting she had no knowledge of the attack and that Hillier acted alone. But the prosecution's evidence, her searches, and other evidence left the jury unconvinced. After a trial that lasted 6 weeks, the jury delivered unanimous guilty verdicts. On the 25th of August, 2023, sentencing took place. Michael Hillier, 39, from Sheffield, was given life imprisonment with a minimum term of 33 years. Rachel Fulstow, 37, from York, was also sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years. As the sentences were read out, Liam Smith's family wept in court. Months of waiting for justice had come to an end. What do you think about this case and the sentences? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more real UK crime stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. There's always another case to uncover.